Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep into the fascinating world of love languages today, based on Gary Chapman's book, The Five Love Languages, The Secret to Love. This book's kind of like a decoder ring for relationships, helping us understand how we give and receive love. So buckle up, because we're about to uncover some pretty amazing insights. Chapman kicks things off with a really interesting comparison. He says our need for love is like a car needing fuel. He calls it the emotional love tank. You know how a car just won't run without gas? Well, Chapman argues that we can't function properly without emotional love. And neglecting this love tank, it can actually be more disastrous than forgetting to fill up your gas tank.
It's a really powerful metaphor, right? The book really stresses that feeling loved is a basic human need, just like food and shelter. We all crave it, from when we're kids to when we're adults, and it's super important in relationships, especially for a marriage to work.
That makes a lot of sense. But hold on, we always hear about this magical in-love feeling, all the butterflies and fireworks. Is Chapman saying that's not real love then?
Oh, he's not dismissing it entirely. He knows that being in love is a real powerful emotion, but he says it's different from genuine lasting love. That kind of love, it takes more than just fleeting feelings. It takes understanding, putting in the effort, and being willing to learn your partner's own unique love language.
Okay, so let's break down this emotional love tank a little more. How does it actually work, like in real life?
Picture your emotional well-being like a tank. And this tank, it needs to be filled with love, right? When it's full, we feel secure, appreciated, and ready to give love back. But when it's low, that's when the warning signs pop up. We might get irritable, withdraw, have trouble focusing, even start having more fights in the relationship.
It's like we're running on fumes emotionally. No wonder things start to go wrong.
Exactly. And that's where the five love languages come in. Chapman's argument is that we all have different ways of receiving and expressing love, just like different languages. And if we're not speaking the right love language, all our efforts to show love might completely miss the mark.
So what are these five love languages? Spill the beans.
They are words of affirmation, quality time, receiving gifts, acts of service, and physical touch.
So it's not enough to just say, I love you.
Yeah.
You have to express it in a way that actually speaks to your partner, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that story about Bill and Betty Jo. Bill worked so hard to provide for his family, he thought that was the best way to show love. But Betty Jo felt totally neglected and unappreciated.
Perfect example of how speaking the wrong love language can cause so much misunderstanding. Bill was showing love through acts of service, but for Betty Jo, her main love language was quality time. What she really craved was his attention, doing things together, having meaningful conversations.
It really shows how what we think is loving might not be what our partner needs at all.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's where understanding these love languages becomes so important, and it helps us to stop making assumptions and start learning how to communicate love in a way that truly connects with our partner.
All right, let's dive into each of these love languages. First up, words of affirmation. The story of Allison, the writer, and her husband, Keith, really stuck with me. Allison dreamed of getting published, but she just didn't have the confidence.
And Keith, he knew her love language, so he showered her with genuine praise and encouragement, telling her how talented she was, how much he believed in her writing. Those words of affirmation, they were like fuel for her fire.
And it worked. She finally finished her manuscript and became a published author. It's amazing how powerful words can be when they're spoken in the right language. Now, what about those who need quality time? What does that look like in a relationship?
The story of Patrick and his wife is a good illustration. Patrick, he had the best intentions. Whenever his wife shared her work frustrations, he'd try to fix her problems, offer solutions.
Well, I think we've all been there. Trying to help, but totally missing the point.
Exactly. And it backfired. What his wife really needed was his undivided attention, his empathy. Just to listen and be present with her emotions. For someone whose love language is quality time, it's all about feeling truly seen, heard, and understood.
It's not about the quantity of time, but the quality of the connection, right?
Yeah.
Really listening, making eye contact, putting away distractions, having meaningful conversations. Those actions speak volumes to someone who values quality time.
Exactly. It can be as simple as having dinner together without phones, taking a walk, or just cuddling on the couch and talking. It's all about creating a space where you can connect and just be present with each other.
So we've covered words of affirmation and quality time. Next up is receiving gifts. And I'm curious about this one because, let's be honest, who doesn't love getting gifts? But is it really that simple?
It's not about showering someone with expensive presents. It's the thoughtfulness and effort behind the gift that matters. The story of Jim and Janice in the book, it shows this perfectly. Their marriage was falling apart, and Jim was clueless. He thought he was a good husband, providing for her. Why wasn't Janice happy?
He was totally missing the point.
Yes, he was speaking a completely different love language. Once he learned that Janice's primary love language was receiving gifts, he started changing how he showed love.
He went all out with the gift-giving, bringing her flowers, leaving sweet notes, even surprised her with a weekend getaway.
Exactly. And it wasn't about how much money he spent, it was what those gifts represented, you know? They were tangible expressions of his love, care, and attention. For Janice, those gestures meant the world and helped to rekindle their relationship.
So it's not about being materialistic. It's about those little, tangible tokens of affection that say, I'm thinking of you. I'm starting to see how each love language has its own special meaning. Now, let's talk about acts of service. This one really resonates with me. Like Mark and Mary, the couple who always fought about chores. Mary felt completely overwhelmed, while Mark just didn't get why it was such a big deal.
Ah, yes, the classic chore wars. This is a huge source of conflict for couples, especially when their love languages clash. For someone like Mary, whose main love language is acts of service, helping with chores is a major way to show love and care. It's about lightening her load, making her life a little easier.
It's those small practical things that say, I see you, I appreciate you, and I want to help. Doing the dishes, folding laundry, fixing that leaky faucet, even just running an errand.
Exactly. It's showing love through actions, not just words. And for someone whose love language is acts of service, those gestures make them feel truly loved and appreciated.
Okay, on to the last love language, physical touch.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the most obvious one, right? It's all about those physical expressions of affection. Hugs, kisses, holding hands. But the story of Pete and Patsy shows that even this seemingly straightforward language can be misunderstood.
Absolutely. Pete was craving physical touch, but Patsy was showing love in other ways that weren't working for him. She thought she was being loving, but he felt neglected and rejected.
Like they were speaking different dialects of the same language, but the message was getting lost in translation.
Exactly. They were both trying to express love, but they were using different dictionaries. Once they figured out that physical touch was Pete's main love language, Patsy started being more physically affectionate. She gave him more hugs, held his hand, and just was more physically present with him.
And it made a world of difference in their relationship.
It did. For someone whose love language is physical touch, those physical connections are crucial. They need that to feel loved, secure, and connected. It's not always about grand romantic gestures. It's those small, everyday touches that build intimacy and closeness.
So we've explored all 5 love languages: words of affirmation, quality time, receiving gifts, acts of service, and physical touch. It's fascinating how each one communicates love in its own unique way. It's like learning a new language takes effort, attention, and stepping outside our comfort zones.
And just like learning any new language, it can be tough sometimes, but the rewards are definitely worth it. When we become fluent in our partner's love language, we can build a deeper, more fulfilling, and more loving connection.
Now that we've got a good grasp of the 5 love languages, let's see how these concepts actually play out in real relationships. One thing that really hit home for me in the book is how Chapman emphasizes the importance of love for our well-being.
He argues that feeling genuinely loved can have a huge impact on our self-esteem, our purpose in life, even our physical health.
It's like love nourishes us on so many levels. It's not just an emotional need, it's a fundamental human need that affects our whole being.
Exactly. And when our love tank is full, we're more likely to thrive in every area of life. We feel more confident, secure, and capable of reaching our goals.
But what happens when those love tanks start running on empty? What are the consequences of ignoring this basic need?
That's a great question, and we'll dive deeper into that in the next part of our deep dive.
So we were just talking about those love tanks running dry. It can't be good, right?
Mm-hmm.
What happens when that need for love, it just isn't being met?
Well, remember that car analogy. What happens when a car runs out of gas? It sputters, stalls, maybe even leaves you stranded. Same thing can happen in relationships when our emotional needs are neglected. We might get irritable, withdraw, become resentful, communication breaks down, conflicts get bigger, the whole relationship suffers.
It's like the relationship engine starts to seize up. And Chapman even talks about how this can mess with our physical health too, right?
Exactly. He points to research that shows a connection between how we feel emotionally and our physical health. When we feel unloved or disconnected for a long time, it can actually show up as physical symptoms. Headaches, fatigue, digestion problems, even a weaker immune system. It's like our bodies are reflecting the emotional distress.
So it's not just about feeling a little down. It can have real consequences for our well-being. Makes understanding and speaking each other's love languages even more important, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's about creating a nurturing and supportive environment where both partners feel loved, valued, and understood. And that's where Chapman's practical advice comes in. He gives a lot of concrete tips on how to actually use these love languages.
One thing I found really helpful was the tank check game. Can you explain how that works?
Sure, it's a really simple but powerful tool for checking in with your partner. You just ask them, on a scale of 0 to 10, how full is your love tank tonight?
Like taking their emotional temperature. It opens up the door for a deeper conversation.
Exactly. It invites vulnerability, sharing your needs, creating understanding. And based on their answer, you can tailor your actions to fill their tank. If they're feeling low, offer words of affirmation, spend quality time with them, give them a thoughtful gift, do something helpful, or just give them a hug.
Be proactive and responsive to their needs. Speak their love language in a way that makes them feel truly cared for. I love how simple it is, yet so powerful for a relationship.
And Chapman emphasizes being consistent. It's not about those grand gestures every once in a while. It's about making small, everyday efforts to speak your partner's love language. Those little acts of love, they build up over time, and they create a strong foundation of connection and intimacy.
Like making regular deposits into that emotional bank account.
Yeah.
But let's be real, relationships aren't always easy. We all face challenges, conflicts, moments when we feel disconnected. How do love languages help us get through those rough patches?
That's where forgiveness becomes super important. Chapman talks about how holding on to anger and resentment can poison a relationship. It drains those love tanks even further.
Like carrying a heavy weight. It drags us down and keeps us from moving forward.
Exactly. And he says forgiveness isn't about saying hurtful behavior is okay. It's about letting go of the bitterness and pain so we can heal and reconnect.
So it's a gift to ourselves as much as it is to our partner. It frees us from that negativity and allows us to be more open and loving.
Absolutely. And Chapman gets that forgiveness can be really hard. It takes time, effort, and a willingness to let go of those hurt feelings. But he offers practical tools and strategies for working through it to ultimately create a more loving and harmonious relationship.
Another challenge Chapman talks about is that sometimes we have to speak our partner's love language even when it feels unnatural to us, like stepping outside our comfort zone and learning a whole new way of expressing ourselves.
Exactly. And this can be tough when our partner's love language is completely different from our own. Like if your love language is words of affirmation, but theirs is acts of service, you have to make a conscious effort to show love through actions, not just words.
It's like learning any new skill. It takes practice and dedication. But the more we try, the better we become at speaking our partner's love language.
And the more we speak their language, the better we communicate love and build that deep connection. It's about going beyond our own preferences and making a choice to love our partner in a way that truly resonates with them.
Now, Chapman also makes a fascinating point about how love affects our sense of significance. He says feeling loved can actually boost our self-esteem and make us feel more valuable.
He argues that we all have this deep need to feel significant, to know that our life has meaning and purpose. And when we experience real love, it fulfills that need in a profound way. It tells us, you matter. You are worthy of love and belonging.
Like love validates our existence and gives us a reason to be. And this can be especially crucial in relationships where one or both partners might be struggling with self-doubt.
Absolutely. Feeling loved and appreciated can be so empowering. It helps us see ourselves in a more positive light, embrace our strengths and our imperfections. Like, love gives us the courage to be ourselves, to shine brightly.
But what happens when this need for significance isn't met in the relationship? Chapman shares some heartbreaking stories about couples dealing with this very issue.
He tells the story of Jean and Norm, married for over 30 years. Jean felt emotionally neglected, even though Norm tried to show love through acts of service, like fixing things around the house and taking care of practical matters.
But those acts of service weren't speaking to her heart. She craved quality time, those meaningful conversations and shared experiences that made her feel seen and heard.
Exactly. And Norm, he felt unappreciated because Jean wasn't expressing love in his language, which was acts of service. They were both trying, but their efforts missed the mark because they were speaking different love languages.
Shows how crucial it is to understand and speak each other's love language, especially when it comes to meeting that deep need for significance.
And once Jean and Norm realized this, they started changing things. Norm made quality time with Jean a priority, and Jean made an effort to express love through acts of service that mattered to Norm. Their relationship was totally transformed.
Amazing how a little understanding and effort can make such a difference. And Chapman doesn't shy away from the tough stuff in relationships. He shares some pretty intense stories about couples facing seemingly impossible challenges.
One that really stuck with me was about Anne. She was struggling with intense hatred towards her husband, Glenn. Their relationship had become so toxic she felt trapped in a cycle of anger and resentment.
Sounds like they were at a breaking point. What could possibly help in a situation like that?
Well, Chapman suggested something pretty radical. He encouraged Anne to try an experiment, to start speaking Glenn's love language even though she felt nothing but hatred for him.
Wow, that's bold. Seems counterintuitive to express love when you're feeling so much negativity.
It does, but Anne, she was desperate for change, so she was willing to try anything, and the results were incredible.
So even when a relationship feels totally broken, love can still find a way through.
That's the amazing thing about love. It has this incredible power to heal and transform.
This brings up an important question. How do we actually apply these concepts in our own lives? It's one thing to understand the theory, but how do we put it into practice?
That's where we need to get into some practical strategies and tips, and that's what we'll be focusing on in the final part of our deep dive.
We've uncovered some pretty profound stuff about love languages and how they affect relationships. It's like we've been handed this map to navigate the world of love. But now comes the tricky part, right? How do we actually use this stuff in our own lives?
Well, the first step is awareness, recognizing that these love languages exist and that your partner might have a totally different one than you. So start paying attention. Watch their behavior, listen to what they say, notice what makes them feel loved and appreciated.
So like tuning into those little hints, those things we might have missed before.
Exactly. And once you've got a good sense of your partner's love language, start weaving those gestures into your everyday interactions. Consistency is key here. It's not about the big, flashy gestures. It's those small, everyday acts of love that really make a difference over time.
Like leaving a little note, giving a back rub after a tough day, or just really listening when they're talking.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to experiment a bit. If you're not totally sure what their love language is, try expressing love in different ways. See what sticks, what gets a positive reaction. Pay attention to how they respond, their body language, what they say.
Like being a love detective, gathering clues to figure out their heart. Chapman gives some great tips for each love language, doesn't he?
He does. For example, if your partner's language is words of affirmation, he suggests giving specific, genuine compliments. Compliments that show you really appreciate and admire them. Instead of just saying, "You look nice," try something like, "I love how that color makes your eyes sparkle."
Go beyond the generic, make it personal.
Yeah.
And for quality time, it's not just about being in the same room, right? It's about being fully present mentally and emotionally.
Exactly. Put those phones away, turn off the TV, make eye contact, truly listen to what they're saying, ask questions, be genuinely interested in their thoughts and feelings.
Create that space where you can truly connect, no distractions. And for receiving gifts, it's not about the cost, it's the thought.
Right. It could be something small and inexpensive that shows you know their interests, or something handmade that shows you put your time and effort into it.
It's the thought that counts, for sure. Now, for acts of service, Chapman really stresses that it's got to be the right kind of service, right?
Absolutely. Some people love help with chores. Others prefer help with errands or things related to work or hobbies. You have to understand their specific needs and find ways to make their life easier.
And physical touch. It's all about those nonverbal ways of showing affection. Hugs, kisses, a back rub, holding hands.
And don't underestimate the power of those little touches. A touch on the arm, a quick kiss, a hug when they're stressed. It can go a long way in making them feel loved.
It's about those physical connections that strengthen the emotional bond. Okay, so we've covered the tips for each love language. But what about those times when showing love is hard? Life throws curveballs, we get stressed, we fight, we even resent each other sometimes. How do we deal with those tough times and still keep those love tanks full?
That's where forgiveness and intentional effort come in. When we're hurting, angry, resentful, showing love is the last thing we want to do. But Chapman says we have to choose love, even when it feels impossible.
It's about deciding to act in loving ways, even when it's hard, trying to see things from their perspective, empathize with their feelings, find ways to reconnect.
Exactly. Sometimes that means having a tough conversation, saying sorry for our mistakes, or just doing something kind, even when we're hurting.
Break those negative patterns. Choose love over anger.
And remember, love's a journey, not a destination. It takes constant work, communication, and a willingness to grow together. But the rewards are amazing.
It's about building that deep, satisfying connection, where both of you feel seen, heard, loved, and truly cherished. As we wrap up our deep dive into love languages, what's the one piece of advice you'd give to someone who's just starting to learn about this stuff?
I'd say start by asking yourself and your partner a simple question. What makes you feel loved? Be open to their answer, be willing to learn, and be committed to expressing love in a way that truly speaks to them.
It's about going on this incredible journey of discovery together, a journey that can lead to deeper intimacy, more understanding, and a love that lasts. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of love languages. We hope you've learned something valuable to use in your own relationships. Until next time, keep those love tanks full.